So, you know, usually award schemes caught a lot of controversies, and it's part of it adds to the fun, it adds to all the excitement. But usually these controversies tend to bring a lot of heads together. One of the awards that has caught lots of controversies over the past few years has been the Ballon d'Or, and reports that we are hearing indicates that Lionel Messi has won his 8th Ballon d'Or. That's incredible, especially for if you look at his trajectory and his growth. There are lots of talk out there. There are lots of debate out there. But Percy, before I bring you in, I want us to look at the Ballon d'Or. Then we can look at, has Messi, if he wins it, as the report is indicating, has he cemented his status as the greatest of all time? Now, first of all, somebody may ask, how are the votes allocated when it comes to the Ballon d'Or? Or what's the vote for? So the rule allocation is that FIFA bestows the awards according to one.
It's actually France football.
Yes, French football, sorry. The Ballon d'Or or whatever. He is according to one, performance on the pitch, then 2, character, behavior is very, very key, because you are serving as an ambassador, a role model to children. So these are the 2 major indices according to Ballon d'Or. 1, performance on the pitch across the calendar year, and your behavior. According to Ballon d'Or, the behavioral aspect is so important because they deem it as you are representing a brand, and so when you are being showcased to represent that brand needs to speak to you and speak for you. Then the second thing we need to look at is how are the votes done. Now, there's a diverse international jury, and these are a jury of journalists, a jury of captains, a jury of a select jury that come from expertise across the world. You and I sitting here, if it's the FIFA best player, we know it comes from captains, it comes from journalists or from countries and all of that, coaches and fans. But if it's the Ballon d'Or, it's also a select few from journalists, certain expertise in the game, but an international jury made up of esteemed people who have a category with which they look at. So these are the more or less the indices FIFA looks at. So 1, we cannot question the integrity of the awards, because especially when it comes to FIFA's awards, nobody will tell who's our captain now, Thomas Partey. He looks at the dynamics and decides who to vote. So you don't force somebody to vote for anybody. You get it right. Mm-hmm. When it comes to the Ballon d'Or, that is awarded by the French magazine as well. These are esteemed guys, panel of jury that are made up of esteemed guys. So we can look at the integrity of the awards and say at least 80 to 90% you can hold their integrity in place. Now, does Lionel Messi deserve his 8th Ballon d'Or? That's the first thing I want us to look at. I have my own personal opinion though. There are about 3 front runners, in my honest opinion. Kylian Mbappe, with what he did with the French national team at the World Cup, and you could say what he did with PSG. But then performances at PSG mostly do not earn you a lot of accolades. There's Erling Haaland. He won the Champions League with Manchester City. He won the FA Cup with Manchester City. He won the league with Manchester City, breaking the highest goal scored in a season, not just in the league, but also in terms of the one who has scored most goals in the Premier League. So literally everything good in the Premier League, it's literally revolves around him. So these are the 3 men. Messi winning the World Cup, the biggest football fiesta. Does he deserve it? If reports is coming out is true.
Okay, first of all, like you said, I agree with you in a bit of some of them. There are some too, I have my own opinions. First of all, you were saying we can't criticize, which I have.
I'm not saying we can't criticize, but I think that we should respect the.
Of course. First of all,
the experience of these guys.
First of all, I don't rate these awards.
Okay.
Of course, on the side of we having a lot of arguments and the rest, we would do it, but I don't rate them.
Okay.
Because they are not absolute. They are not apt.
Okay.
They are awards that are given definitely by, apart from the person's performance, the feelings and the emotions and your attachment to the person is inevitable.
Every award scheme,
of course,
yeah.
That's so it is not absolute. So I wouldn't really want to cite it. Now with the 8th Ballon d'Or, you see, it's inevitable that whenever there is a major international competition in a year, it supersedes whatever competition that is played within the year.
Yeah.
That in actual sense should have been the case. We wouldn't have had a problem with them, because if we are just to maybe do a few of them, 2002 World Cup, who won if you remember Max Jardel of Porto.
Mario
Jardel.
The guy who
couldn't even make the cut to the Brazilian national team.
Yeah.
We had a Ronaldo who had been out.
Goals
he had been out for a season and a half, 1.5 years. He comes to you, and that season, 2002, if you check the Real Madrid team that won the Champions League, Zidane was at the forefront. There was Fernando Morientes who was also there. Even if you take the Leverkusen team, you had Michael Ballack and all of them. You had Oliver Kahn, even in the German national team. Ronaldo stays home for a year and a half. He comes in, he scores 8 to 9 goals or so.
He scored 9 goals.
9 goals. He scores 9
highest goals. Ever in the world.
Yes. No, highest actually is what do you call it? Just Fontaine. Just Fontaine scored 14. Yes, in the 1958. Yes, sir. He scores these goals, he wins the Golden Boot, he wins the World Cup, then he's presented the Ballon d'Or.
Okay.
Every other thing that the Real Madrid team did, even with Zidane in that team, just because Zidane left in the group stages, it was scrapped off. 2006, people forget how phenomenal Ronaldinho was in 2006 with Barcelona, en route to winning the Champions League for the second time ever in their history. You watch the way he demolished AC Milan in the semi-final. But just in the final, he couldn't really show up.
He actually showed up.
He showed up.
There are a lot of contributions that
but then because he didn't score, then we enter the World Cup. We are expecting this is another Ballon d'Or for Ronaldinho.
He goes to Cannavaro.
Yes, because in the quarterfinals, Brazil exits. Cannavaro with Juventus practically didn't do anything in the Champions League. Then Italy wins, which we know that if had it not been Zidane's headbutt, even though he wouldn't have won the World Cup, he would have won the Ballon d'Or. But because of the headbutt, everything Ronaldinho does, every single thing, I want to, so that we would understand the situation of Haaland. 2010 World Cup, we know what Schneider did. There was a treble. This is Inter Milan, unprecedented. That's never happened, never ever happened in what you call it, in the
history of Inter Milan.
Inter Milan, and even in the Italian league, no Italian team has won the treble. Then he goes to the finals of the World Cup. He scores 5 goals.
Now he lost the final.
He lost the final. He scores 5 goals. Yes. And you watch him and his contributions in the World Cup, phenomenal. We have a Messi. This same Messi.
That 2010 is the odd one out.
You have a Messi. The World Cup, he exits, but he's humiliated by the German team.
Terrible.
In the round 16. He is humiliated and he's out. Then we come to the narrative and we're like, okay, it's supposed to be a World Cup here. Yes, Schneider has done everything. He's gone to the final. He's won a treble. Then we don't know what happens.
Iniesta.
Okay. Then even if you are talking about everything, then let's talk about Iniesta. He wins that. But that is when we got to know that it goes beyond the player's performance. Okay. Because as then the pedigree these two gentlemen, himself and Ronaldo, had gotten to, like I said, there were too much of sentimentals in it.
We had a godlike start.
2014, we have a similar situation.
But even 2012, Ronaldo.
Let's even go to 2012. There was no World Cup.
I'm talking about Ronaldo's controversial Ballon d'Or.
That was in 2013. So 2013, I even want to take the World Cup years. So I even want to take 2014 when there was another controversial one. You have a Germany. You have 3 players who have arguably done their best for their national team. You have a Manuel Neuer, who is the best goalkeeper. You have a Thomas Müller. who is also there, and you have okay, I wouldn't even want to bring Iron Robin in, but these two, they win the World Cup, and even in that season, Champions League, they get to the semi-final. Then we have Ronaldo who wins the Champions League, also breaks all the records, but he is not able to do well. He actually exits in the group stages. Then we change the narrative again. Now, okay, this time around, just like Messi, this guy did well in the Champions League. He broke some records, just like Haaland has done. Then we give it to Ronaldo.
So let's
so in actual sense, every single thing you said, it should have been consistent.
So there's some level of consistency.
The inconsistency has been very, very consistent.
Does he deserve it? Does Lionel Messi deserve it?
Lionel Messi deserving it. If we are going with the concept of it being a World Cup year, it's not debatable.
Which would you prefer?
Now, I would, when we say someone is the best
player in a calendar season,
I would not go for just a tournament that is played in 9 matches.
After 7 games.
7 games. Because literally after the World Cup, Mr. Messi was just out. You can talk about, okay, he did well in the French League, but we all know French League.
It's the biggest football, thing in the world, fiesta in the world.
And I am saying that that is why we award the best player for that football competition.
Anyway, so Messi believes that
I believe
there's too much inconsistency.
It makes it so difficult to even.
He believes that if they want to go on the trajectory that is the World Cup season, Lionel Messi deserves it. But then he believes that we shouldn't just look at the World Cup, we should look at football being played in totality. And it's an entire season. And so he's looking at Erling Haaland, and that's where personally I agree with him. I think that the narrative that it's a World Cup season, it's the biggest football fiesta in the season, and that people should consider the World Cup and the person who has won it, for me, it's hogwash, because you do not award the best player in a calendar year based on just 7 games. Because if you situate performance in just 7 games, you are looking at you are ignoring several indices. The league is played over a period of almost an entire year.
Over 60 games.
There are cup competitions that are played over several periods. Yeah. This is Erling Haaland, who has proven his dominance in every single cup competition that was played throughout the season. He's won everything that there is to win. For me, in all honesty, I think that those who are responsible for awarding players, either the Ballon d'Or, either the FIFA award, should rethink the narrative of, it's a World Cup season, it's a Champions League season. Let's properly put performances in place, because I'll take you back to Ronaldo. When he won his second Ballon d'Or, I'm talking about R9.
Yeah.
He never won the Champions League.
No.
At the time, he never won the World Cup.
Yeah.
But listen, people looked at this guy and said, come on, there is no way anybody's performance beat his performance in the calendar year. And during those times, they awarded performances based on what you did in the calendar year, not because you had won a certain trophy or a certain trophy.
Not to even cut you short, the first time he won it,
that was in 1996.
1997.
1997.
That was when he won the first one. From PSV.
At the time, it was PSV moving to Barcelona.
This is a player who plays in PSV to Barcelona. He never played in the Euros.
Incredible.
He never played in any big competition. All he did was to play in his own league.
Because of time.
And it was so inevitable
because of time.
This is the best.
Is Messi arguably the greatest player of all time?
I don't want to assert to anyone being the greatest player of all time, because we have errors.
So Messi is not a GOAT?
No, there's nothing like a GOAT. I don't want to assert to something like a GOAT, because
we keep speaking the same language.
It doesn't apply. The rules change, the type of players change, the group of players that we move with. So if we are to specifically go by the fact that, okay, someone has won 8 Ballon d'Ors, what about during the time of Pelé? Or during the time of Maradona, when it was not awarded to South American players, those who don't play in Europe.
Okay.
So how many Ballon d'Ors would Pelé won? How many would Garrincha win? How many would Didi win?
Listen, let me even add that to that narrative before we quickly bow out of here. The truth of the matter is that, like we've agreed, football is played in errors. in the Maradona era, there are certain rules that do not apply, that applied back then, that do not apply now. Rules that now favor players to do certain things. Rules that back then took away certain qualities from certain players, or even added certain things to certain players that made them perform either better or reduce their performance. So for me, I think that this stance, I've made this stance across on several platforms. I do not believe that you can attribute the greatest of all time to one particular player that cuts across generations. We can say the greatest of all time in an era. Yeah. So in the 90s, we could look at the players that existed back then and say the greatest of all time in the 90s, in the 2000s, the greatest of all time, maybe in the last decade, the greatest of all time. Then we can say, okay, Messi deserves the award as the greatest of all time in the last 20 years. So we put the last 20 years under the microscope, analyze, look at all the indices, then award everything. But for me, I do not think there's one player that deserves the greatest of all time.
Let me just end up with this. Okay. Now, with respect to, one thing I want to say is that Haaland didn't help himself.
Why?
When we say someone is the greatest, or let's say the best player of a season, of many of these players that you've talked about, it is when you need the player, how the dominance of the, not just the numbers. Because you talked about the Mario Jardel. He's got a lot of goals. Why has nobody spoke about him? Because of course he was playing in Porto. And if you talk about Haaland, City actually have already been dominant in the league. In fact, they had won like 2 straight before Haaland came. So if you talk about his dominance in the league, it wasn't anything that was somewhat, of course, you can talk about individually, he scored more goals.
Let's wrap up. So
for me,
60, 30 seconds.
If it was any other player,
I think he didn't help himself because of his inconsistency.
Apart from that,
an interesting discussion can even come up. Does this narrative of mine and yours apply to other sports, as in having the greatest of all time in boxing? The greatest, and it's true, because listen, boxing is played in eras, basketball is played in eras. There were times in boxing we had 25 rounds, 15 rounds, and now
they could actually box like 4 or 5 times.
Boxing has been limited to just 12 rounds. Wow. Basketball back then, they were in the 70s. 3-pointers were not there in the 70s. Were not there. So there are a lot of indices that have been added and removed that can add to the quality of a player or take away from the quality of a player. So in my honest opinion, I do not think anybody deserves the greatest of all time. We can look at it from the perspective of an era. So the greatest of all time in one particular era, the greatest of all time in one particular season. But for Messi, I think that nobody is questioning his greatness. If he wins it, he's done it. But this is the opinion of the guys here from Sports 101. What do you think? What do you also believe? Who is the greatest of all time when it comes to football? Messi apparently is taking away his 8th Ballon d'Or. Do you believe in that session that he deserves it? Let's get to see your views or hear from you in the comment section. We are shooting live from the Shocks Hub. Amazing place. Right after this place, I'm grabbing something to eat and something to drink. You can also do same. Check in here, grab something to eat. They are located at the Takrady Mall. Guys, we are out. Make sure you subscribe to Sports 101.